I think one of the things we have to understand, and we've been doing at Emily's List research on the vice president for this past year and have been with her for many years. So I'm going to take this on looking forward. And what I know, based on that research, based on the work that we've done for the vice president, is that she is well equipped to litigate this case against Donald Trump. The research that we have done shows that when we talk about the vice president's record on issues like reproductive freedom, she is so compelling to voters, the voters that we need to turn out and win in November, young voters, women, voters of color. When we talk to them about her record and the work that she has done over the course of her career in standing up on reproductive freedom and other issues, they come to this ticket, and we expect that that's what's going to happen in November. I will also say that we know, and we've seen since the Dobbs decision, that when we put a clear choice in front of voters around the stakes on abortion rights, when we talk to them about what is in front of them in these elections, Democrats win, and we're going to do that again with our best messenger on abortion rights in Vice President Harris.
Jessica, I wonder what you make of some of the rhetoric that we're already hearing surrounding a potential Kamala Harris candidacy here, a Harris campaign. You know that it's been sport here in Washington to mispronounce her name on a regular basis, which Donald Trump continues to do. Chris LaCivita, the co-manager of the campaign, issued a statement saying that Trump survived an assassin's bullet. The last thing we're worrying about is Laughin' Kamala. That's apparently going to be the nickname that Donald Trump uses going forward here. There's another one that I heard that isn't worth repeating. I just wonder to what extent she should acknowledge this.
Well, look, as you just outlined, there are going to be some really gross racist and sexist attacks against the vice president. We've already seen that. We know that Republicans are going to do that. And so that is something that at Emily's List, we have fought back against for a long time, the disinformation, the misinformation that we know women of color candidates in particular are targets of. I have to tell you that Republicans are doing this because they are terrified about Kamala Harris. They are terrified to face such an accomplished and prepared candidate who is going to be able to effectively litigate a case on an issue that we know is going to win this election, abortion rights. But not just that. They are terrified of a candidate who is ready to lead on day one. For the past 3 years, she has been on a national stage. She has cultivated relationships with world leaders. She has delivered economic relief for people across this country. She's an incredible record throughout her career of fighting for people. So they're scared, and they are going to resort to the tactics that they always resort to in these times, and they are going to resort to these racist and sexist attacks. We are going to push back against those, and we're going to do the work of amplifying her voice. And we know that when we do that, voters will be compelled to vote for her, and we will win.
Well, Jessica, of course, at Emily's List, while you are going to be throwing your support behind Kamala Harris's presidential ambitions, your wider mission is to get Democratic women elected into office at all levels of the U.S. government. Knowing what we have learned in the last 24 hours, the notion that concern about Democrats being able to retain control of the Senate or get control of the House, the down-ballot implications had a factor in Joe Biden's decision. Would Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket actually help some of those vulnerable Democrats that we're watching, like Senator Tammy Baldwin or Senator Jackie Rosen? How do you view that?
Well, first of all, I'll say that the electric energy that we're feeling in the Democratic Party right now is incredibly helpful. It is the jolt that we need to get back to a conversation that we know is what is going to decide this election. That we need to have a conversation with voters that is consistent and clear about the choice that they are facing in this election. And that is true at every level of the ballot. When we talk to voters about the stakes on abortion rights and reproductive freedom, the choice that they have between a ticket that is going to defend and restore those rights and Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, who would enact a national abortion ban, who've signed on for these awful state abortion bans that are in place right now, and for the most dangerous elements of Project 2025, voters are clear that they will stand with us. And that choice, when we put it in front of voters, whether we're talking about a state legislative race, a U.S. Senate race, or the race for the presidency, we know Democrats will be successful if that's the conversation we're having. And that's exactly what we're going to do between now and November.
It appears that Marianne Williamson is going to take a swing at the nomination if given the opportunity. Jessica says she will compete for the spot after previously leaving the race and getting back into the race. Should she be given that chance?
Well, look, I think this is a democracy, but what we've seen from in the last 24 hours is just an incredible show of support for Vice President Harris. We have seen that from, as I've said, every region of the country, elected officials at all levels of the ballot. We've seen it from organizations that are on a whole wide range of issues, and they all know what I know, which is that there is no one more prepared to win this election against Donald Trump. There was no one who is more prepared to lead this country on day one than Kamala Harris. So I fully expect that Kamala Harris is going to be our Democratic nominee, and she is going to win in November and will be in the White House at this time next year.
Well, Jessica, of course, if she is the top of the ticket, someone needs to be on that ticket with her. I've heard suggestions in the last 24 hours that if it is to be Kamala Harris, a woman of color, who is leading the Democratic ticket, that it's going to need to be a white man on it with her to balance things out. What do you think of that notion? Should she be considering a woman like Governor Gretchen Whitmer to be her vice president if she wins the nomination?
Well, I'm not going to put my own parameters out there for the vice president. I trust her to make the decision that's right for her, to choose a partner who is going to serve admirably with her and is going to be the right partner for her in this ticket. But I will say that regardless of who she chooses, we know that that ticket is going to provide a really clear contrast with Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, who embrace the most extreme elements of the Republican Party and the MAGA movement. And this is going to be a clear choice between a ticket that is going to stand up and defend our rights and our freedoms, that is going to be for a better economic future for our country, and a choice between Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, who, as I said, embrace the most dangerous elements of Project 2025 and are going to take this country down a really dark path. That's the choice voters are going to have in front of them, regardless of who is on this ticket with us. That is going to be the choice in November.
Jessica, I want to get back to something that we were talking about a bit earlier, and that's just the change in stakes for Donald Trump to be debating a woman, and in this case, a woman of color, and lessons learned from the 2016 race in which Donald Trump shared a stage with Hillary Clinton. What do you expect to see if Donald Trump actually makes good on this debate appointment that he had with Joe Biden? I realize that he might want a different venue at this point, but if something takes place in a debate between these two candidates, how does this change the game for Donald Trump?
Well, I am sure that Donald Trump and his team have seen what I've seen, and that is a lifetime and a record of achievement from Kamala Harris, and just an incredible litigator. Her background as a prosecutor, we saw it in the U.S. Senate on display in the Judiciary Committee. No one wants to be in her line of sight when it comes to having to defend a record that the American people are clear that they don't want. And so I expect that they have to be pretty scared of that moment. She's an incredibly effective messenger on issues, including reproductive freedom, but certainly not limited to that. And it is going to be a daunting task for them. She's going to litigate this case incredibly effectively against Donald Trump.
Well, Jessica, you've mentioned reproductive freedom a few times during this conversation. It was a conversation that notably wasn't really being had in Milwaukee, where Joe and I were last week. And a lot of the discussions we were having with people gathered there and strategists was this notion that the Republican Party, and especially Donald Trump in selecting J.D. Vance as his vice presidential nominee, seems to have decided not to go for suburban women in this election cycle, to focus on rural areas, working class men in particular. Do you think having Harris at the top of the ticket may actually change that strategy, and you have to counter what could be a more concerted effort with the Republicans and the Trump campaign to go after that same base of voters?
Well, I will say, I mean, watching the RNC last week, I know that Republicans like Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, they can read polls and they don't want to talk about this issue. But unfortunately for them, this is not a branding problem for them. It's an agenda problem. And it doesn't matter where you are in this country. We have seen since the Dobbs decision in red states, purple states, all over this country, people believe overwhelmingly that these are decisions that belong with individuals, that they should be able to make them themselves, their private medical choices, and that these are decisions that the government, bureaucracy, courts should not be involved in. They are very clear on that. Voters are very clear on that. And so the problem for Donald Trump and JD Vance and Republicans like them up and down the ticket is that you can run, but you cannot hide from this. We know their records. We're going to put that in front of voters. And wherever you are, again, around the country, they are on the wrong side of this issue.